Alrighty, greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to our Monday night live stream for now week 10 of the 2025 fantasy football season. Over the course of the next hour or so, we're going to be talking about all things fantasy football, whether it is recapping what happened in week 9, and of course, progressing ourselves towards week 10. Again, many of us are in need of potential waiver wire pickups, as there are going to be 4 teams on bye going into this week, and of course, there are a plethora of injuries that continue to plague our teams. Nonetheless, I'm sure there's, besides the injuries, the waiver wires with bye weeks, I'm sure there's a lot of inconsistency. I saw as the intro video was or intro music was going, of course, I think it was Clarence Owens. Yeah, he said, I don't trust any Arizona running backs, even when Benson comes back. Yeah, look, it's been a really tough season already. And the fact that we have Amari DeMarcado coming out of absolutely nowhere to kind of run the entire backfield here tonight, after Bam Knight had been the clear and away primary RB of this backfield for the last 2 games, it was quite the surprise, to say the very least. And if I was to have guessed, okay, if Bam Knight's not going to find success, who would be? I would assume it would have been Michael Carter. But that wasn't even the case within this circumstance. Nonetheless, again, we're going to be answering questions. If you guys have any questions, be sure to go ahead and ask it in the live chat. If you want to claim priority, you can send it via the super chat. Just regardless of wherever you send it, make sure you include your scoring format. The more context you provide within your question, the easier it'll be for myself and of course, other members of the community to be able to help answer your question. Okay, let's get into it, shall we? Let's change a couple things here. Before I do so, again, a reminder, if you guys want to go ahead and get my rankings every single Sunday morning, be sure to check out Betr. Of course, you can get a free $10 when using code Andrew, so take advantage of the opportunity. All you have to do is be eligible via the map to the right side of the screen. But of course, all the information to get my rankings for the remainder of the season down in the description. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go ahead and throw up the live chat. We had Andy who sent it to super just really quickly. He said, for rest of season and a half PPR, would you rather roster any of Parker Washington / Alec Pierce Horton? Okay, actually, let's do it this way. Okay, Parker Washington, Alec Pierce, Horton over Debo, Tedero McMillan, or Quentin Johnston. Yes, unfortunately, this is a sincere question. I mean, I don't think it's the wrong question to ask. I think it really depends on where we're looking at in terms of the Brian Thomas Jr. ankle injury he most recently sustained. If that's going to be a high ankle sprain and it's going to hold him out for, let's say, for example, 3-4 weeks, I think at that point, I think there's a discussion to be had regarding like the potential of Parker Washington over a Quentin Johnston. I know he came away with a touchdown this week, but again, still not a lot of healthy opportunity share within the offense as a whole. I think there could be a discussion to where Tedero McMillan and Debo Samuel, again, they're very much so, as of thus far this season, touchdown dependent. Tedero McMillan just really hasn't found his footing within that offense. Outside of Rico Dowdle, nobody's relevant within the Carolina Panthers offense for fantasy purposes. So I think a discussion could be had regarding like Parker Washington, Alec Pierce. If Torrey Horton takes over the wide receiver 2 job there and Cooper Kupp falls to the wayside, he could be more valuable than Ted going forward. So as of right now, I'm not willing to outright move these players unless you're going to trade them away. I'm not going to drop them outright for any of the 3 alternatives. I would just consider Johnston as the one that I'm thinking at, like, can I get away with it and effectively do so without losing my mind? Even then, I don't even want to get rid of him because Keenan Allen's up there in age. If Keenan Allen, has an injury upcoming here, could force a lot of opportunity towards Quentin Johnston. If I was you, I would probably just try to 2-for-1 trade, send 2 players for 1, and then go pick up one of those wide receivers. I think that's the better plan of action rather than just dropping 1-for-1 for the rest of the season. Thank you, Andy. Ibrahim sends it a question, says half PPR, go JMO or Parker Washington on my waivers. I mean, Jamison Williams obviously is going to get himself more utilization as we proceed, primarily because the offensive coordinator had came out and specifically said, hey, I want to get him more looks as we proceed. And of course, it was my fault that it wasn't him getting the ball as often as he should have. So if that is going to potentially transpire, I think that is certainly a bonus. But when we look at what Jamison Williams has to compete with in comparison to Parker Washington in the meanwhile for the next 4 or 5 weeks here, again, if Brian Thomas's injury is going to be a sustainable one to where he can play, sure, there's an argument to be made in which Jamison Williams is more valuable. But even if we have Brian Thomas out there, if he's not at a full healthy capacity, Parker Washington, like he did this most recent game, can take over and clearly be the number 1 receiving option of this offense. So in a half PPR, For now, I'd probably stick towards JMO because of the offense and because of the potential for upside there in terms of touchdowns. But in a full PPR, I think it would just be a no-brainer. I'd go towards Parker Washington in this circumstance. Kaiser sends in a question, says, wishing you another happy year of life. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's see what you have here, Kaiser. Kaiser says, I'm currently 4-5 in a 10-team half PPR or full PPR league. I have Mahomes, Tracy, Javonte Williams, Judkins, ETN, T. Higgins, Ricky, BTJ, CD, Pickens, and Pitts. Half of my team is on a bye next week. What moves should I do? I mean, if half your teams are on a bye, I mean, at that point, you call it the week. Just take the L. At that point, you don't want to make too many moves. Like, okay, so this upcoming week, we know that the Cowboys, the Chiefs, I believe the Titans, and I'm missing one more team, the Bengals. They're all on bye this week. So in the event in which, again, Mahomes, Javonte, let's see what else. T. Higgins, BTJ might be injured. CeeDee Lamb is out. Pickens is out. In this circumstance, I mean, I'm not going out and making some crazy moves unless you tell me, all right, listen, Andrew, only 4 teams out of the 10 make the playoffs. Otherwise, if at least 6 teams out of your 10 within your league make the playoffs, then we are perfectly fine to just sack the week and just go to 4-6 and just try to push towards, completing some victories in the final weeks because you have too many good players. Now, in the event in which you can trade T. Higgins and get comparable value in return, CeeDee Lamb, Pickens, unless you're going to get back players of a sufficient value point in exchange for them, that's perfectly fine. But unless that is the case, I'm not going to sell them for a lower potential prospect because I would rather have these players post-bye for the remainder of the season from weeks 11 and beyond to be able to kind of weeks 11, 12, 13, and 14 try to get me to the fantasy playoffs at very least. Within a 4-game streak there, you could end up picking up 4 wins, could end up picking 3, and that'll be enough. Even 2 potentially to make that final playoff position. Thank you, Kaiser. All right, let's go ahead and see what the live chat has to ask. Jameson Williams, boom or bust always. Yeah, I mean, that's just the risk, right? The matter is, like, if you're picking up Jameson Williams, is he going to be like one of your top 2 receivers or is he going to be your flexible option? If he's a flexible option, you can play matchups with him and put him in positions to where he's going to find himself a little bit more potential for that upside rather than another, alternative option that is just going to be purely reliant on just yardage and receptions alone. McCarthy or Fields rest of season, Fannin or Loveland this week? Okay, well, Colston Loveland is probably the better of the 2, primarily because Cole Kmet is out with concussion protocol, and I would assume that Colston Loveland's overall usage share is going to look relatively nice this week, so I'll lean towards him. As for McCarthy or Fields for rest of season, I can't guarantee that Justin Fields plays every game for the remainder of the season, so I would probably just lean towards J.J. McCarthy in this circumstance because I genuinely don't know, even if Fields is going to start this week. I mean, Tyrod Taylor could come and take the starting spot just immediately. We don't know. So as of right now, considering there is so much flux within that kind of a situation, it might just be better off just going with McCarthy there. But obviously, I will admit, I do believe that Fields is the better fantasy prospect when healthy and when put in positions to succeed. What does it say? Is Brandon Aubrey droppable? Eileen, yes. If I've ever learned anything in fantasy football, it's regardless of who's playing quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, Brandon Aubrey's always relevant. Now, I understand this most recent weeks, 6 points-ish, 6 to 8 points. Not the greatest overall look, but ultimately, we have to keep him on roster. Unless you find an alternative option that is significantly better, which oftentimes you're not going to be able to do so with a guy like Brandon Aubrey. Again, if you somehow have the ability to go pick up another kicker that's putting up 10 a week, then sure, go for it. Let's see here. S-Box, what's up, my man? What's up, man? What are your trade recommendations for tomorrow's deadline? I'm 3-6 and number 1 waiver pick. So hoping for a great name to snag. Is your guys' trade deadlines tomorrow? Isn't that kind of early? I feel like that's kind of early. I thought it was like mid-November for... Like, I understand that the NFL trade deadline's tomorrow, but I thought the fantasy football trade deadlines, well, at least I play in leagues that they don't even have trade deadlines. That's the way that I've set it up. So again, even when you get to week 13, if you need to make a move, you got to make a move. You shouldn't be held to, oh, this is my roster. Now I get to crash and burn with it. But in regards to potential players to go after, I mean, again, I'll continue to suggest players that at a 3-6 position, you have to be trading for players that are post-bye week. That is just purely the approach at which you must go after. Now, are there names that I can objectively tell you, oh, these are the guys you want to have? Well, I mean, if Quinshon Judkins is healthy, I would like to go after him. If I could go even get Garrett Wilson and he's healthy, I would like to go after him. So it's a matter of like, are we going to make those investments? Can we go after him? They're both coming off of the bye week. And additionally, they're both coming off of potential injuries, which could lessen their value to where you could end up buying lower on them in comparison to some alternative options out there available. Thank you. Young Money sends in a question. Says, my man, driving home from work. I just wanted to say hi. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Young Money. Hope you're doing well. And yes, I remember the name. National Champ Rush says, what's up? My boy, I'm 4-5. I just lost Jaden. Who do I get? I think it depends on what is available purely. In the event in which you do have the availability of a JJ McCarthy, Marcus Mariota, you can go for those. But in the event in which you have even better prospects available, like Sam Darnold is still out there, that's more than it should be available. I think that there should probably be at very best like Michael Penix, McCarthy, Fields, Mariota. I think that should be the best available. But if somehow, some way, Flacco, potentially Sam Darnold, Trevor Lawrence are out there still to this moment, I would go in those directions rather than the alternatives that I mentioned earlier today within my waiver wire rankings video. Thank you. Do you think the Cards stick with Brissett? I think they should. Genuinely, I think they should. Because within this offense, Brissett looks like the better quarterback in comparison to what Kyler Murray's done over the course of the last couple seasons here. So, yeah, I think this is a actual effective offense when Brissett is running it in comparison to Kyler Murray. So, why not? I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? It says, would you trade CeeDee Lamb for A.J. Brown? If you're super desperate and you're like, Andrew, I need to win this week. If I don't win this week, I'm pretty much mathematically eliminated. Then at that point, yes, I would make the trade. Otherwise, I wouldn't. Let's see here. S-Box says, sorry, I meant NFL trade deadline predictions. Oh, I see what you meant. Okay, I was going to say, in regards to NFL trade deadline predictions, I don't think anything's going to happen tomorrow. I would love for there to be a lot of momentum going in the direction of some potential fantasy assets being moved, like a Breece Hall going to the Chiefs or something of that exchange, or him going to the Chargers. Genuinely, anything that would make some movement occur to where it could provide some value to prospects. I would love for the Carolina Panthers to go trade for another wide receiver. Like, genuinely. Like, go get a legitimate wide receiver. I don't think they will. But I would love to see that. Who's another team that's... I would also like to see... I know that Marquez Valdez-Scantling signed with the Steelers, but that's not the answer. Like, let's go get another receiver for Aaron Rodgers this week, Outside of that... In terms of honestly, if I'm one of those major teams at the top of the pack, specifically my Rams, I would legitimately think the Rams should go trade for another receiver. Because if Puka Nacua gets injured as we get later into the season, like, we're in trouble at that point. We need to have somebody else, another threat. Just like in the same way in which when we went to the Super Bowl back in 21, we went and got OBJ at the deadline. Let's go get somebody else. Go get another receiving option. Let's bring them in and let's make it. Go get Jacoby Myers. Man, Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams have a relationship there. Let's just go make a play for it. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there. I think majority of the trades are going to be defensive or offensive line related, which I don't love to see, but it is what it is. Do I trade Michael Pittman Jr. for Ibuka? I would. I absolutely would. I'd rather have Emeka Ibuka for the remainder of the season. Jeremy Robertson's at a question. Jeremy, thank you. Whenever you get a chance, Jeremy, type it in the live chat. I'll be able to answer that. Thank you, man. Is Hubbard droppable after this week? No, I wouldn't say so. Hubbard is pretty much a handcuff. So in the event in which you do have Rico Dowdle, then you would hold him on roster. But in the event in which you do not have Rico Dowdle, perhaps he could be droppable. But again, you have to just keep into account that if anything was to ever happen to Rico Dowdle, who is currently dealing with a groin injury, there'd be a relatively high likelihood in which Chuba Hubbard comes back in, takes over, and continues to be fantasy successful in the absence of Rico to where he could reestablish his position as the clear and away RB1. But until then, in the event in which you need roster positioning and Hubbard is pretty much filling in as a dead weight, then at that point, yes, we could theoretically move on and keep, improving our roster with other members to kind of provide depth. Andrew, how are you doing in your leagues this year? I think I've been pretty good so far. Again, a lot of the leagues in which I've played in that I genuinely care about, because there's a couple other ones that I'm like, okay, low buy-in, like these are just for, whatever. The legitimate ones. I'm currently sitting like probably majority, at least after today, probably like anywhere between 4th to 6th place because of the volume of injuries within those leagues. I think I've mentioned it before, guys. Those super leagues that I'm in, I've gotten battered by Joe Burrow in a super flex. I got battered by Neighbors. I got battered by BTJ just being absolutely just disastrous this season. I just took another hit this week with Tucker Kraft going down. I'm still, again, in that like kind of structured, like solidified range of like, okay, I'm making the playoffs. I'm going to be in the dance. And I did the same thing last year within these leagues where I'm going to be in the dance. I'm going to get into the playoffs, but I'm building my team for playoffs success to where once I get there, my matchups are so advantageous that nothing is going to really be able to stop me except for an injury. Let's see. A Rockout says trade offer my Jennings for Downs and JMO. You would be trading your Jennings, as in like Jawan Jennings? Yeah, let's trade Jawan Jennings immediately for this. Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see here. Ibrahim says, I have Lamar and Dart. My wide receivers are A.J. Brown, Sutton, Debo, Diggs, Jamison, Williams. In a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league, do I trade Dart for Wandell in a half PPR? Interesting question. Okay, so do you trade Dart for Wandell in a half PPR? Considering your wide receiver depth, I don't think you need to. If you'd like to, you certainly can. I just don't see where I'm playing Wandell Robinson over Sutton, A.J. Brown, or Diggs, or even Debo Samuel, quite frankly. I mean, again, I could probably play him over Debo and Diggs in specific matchups, but ultimately, in a half PPR, the kind of receiver that Wandell Robinson is, doesn't really promote or kind of provide enough value in terms of the potential for touchdown upside being incredibly consistent in comparison to an A.J. Brown, a Sutton, a Debo, comparatively Diggs recently as of late. So in a half PPR, if that's the best you can get and you would like to take it, you certainly can. But I don't think it's a necessity. I would try to go out and potentially make a trade for another alternative option, maybe take Dart and one of your 4 receivers, then go try to get an even better upgrade. But I do like Wandell rest of the season. Again, I will say that first and foremost. I think they've got a really advantageous schedule, but in terms of a half PPR, I just don't love the overall potential of them. What's a reasonable trade offer for Puka Nacua? I mean, if you're going to go after Puka Nacua, you would probably have to give somebody of the top tier quality of wide receiver. So in the event in which you were to try to accomplish that, I would like to assume at very base minimum, oh man, I don't think you can even get him. But let's say, for example, you had the opportunity of offering someone Drake London right now. I think they may consider it. But outside of that, like, I don't know if anybody's getting out of the Puka Nacua sweepstakes. Because at this point, like guys like Chase and JSN, they're pretty much like the same value point. So doing 1-for-1s with that is not going to make any sense. If you're giving a wide receiver for a wide receiver in this circumstance, I would assume that someone of the caliber of a Drake London, maybe Devontae Adams, depending. I mean, at that point, you're just trading the same value for the same value. Yeah, I think it just depends on what you have on roster. And if you do have, theoretically, one of those 2 guys that I mentioned, you can go give it a shot. Thanks, man. All right, let me go ahead and let me go back to some of the super chats that were sent in. Anthony C says, just beat the 8-0 team. Fire. Congratulations. Hopefully your record's looking shiny. Again, beating the 8-0 team is kind of crazy. If you start 8-0 in fantasy, I feel like that's just so lucky that the matchups you were taking on, really, again, besides the fact that you're like setting your rosters every week, the other half of fantasy football that is completely just luck is the schedule that you're given. Like, if your team scores 150 plus points every week, you're going to be in a better position to win than most teams. But if you play against the teams every week that put up 180, like, then you're shit out of luck at that point. It doesn't matter what strategy you have. It doesn't matter what players you have. At that point, you're just in an unlucky, kind of rotation of schedule. In the case of starting 8-0, that's kind of ridiculous. If that team, hasn't made a lot of trades as of yet, I think they've probably sold the bag. But congratulations to the win there, Anthony. H13, what's up, my man? Says in a 12-team full PPR league, we got double flex, tight end premium. I'm 4-5. I've lost 3 in a row. My quarterback is Jordan Love. Running back is Jacobs, Dowdle, Woody, Spears, Kamara. Wide receivers are Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson, Quentin Johnston, Christian Watson, Jacoby Myers, Golden, Hawkinson, and Joko. Any moves? We have Trevor Lawrence, Stroud, Marquise Brown, Sampson on the waivers. I mean, at this point, I don't think you need to make any drastic changes, especially this week. Stroud is not somebody that I want on roster, considering he's probably going to be out with concussion protocol. I do not like Trevor Lawrence against Houston, so I'm most likely going to stick with Jordan Love there. In regards to your running back depth as it currently stands, I think Jacobs, Dowdle are going to be your starters every week rest of season. And then, of course, Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson will be your starting wide receivers every single week for the remainder of the year. You can kind of rotate between Njoku and Hawkinson based on effective matchups, but in a double flex format, Quentin Johnston, Woody Marks, the potential of if in fact Jacoby Myers is traded within the next 24 hours, he could be of more potential value there alongside of Christian Watson as the alternative other flexible play. In terms of any moves that you would theoretically make, it's just a matter of at 4 and 5, can we find someone in your league who's in a very desperate position to which they may be more willing to send away players of high value? So what I mean by that is, if you can find someone in your league who has a Cincinnati Bengal, a Dallas Cowboy, a Kansas City Chief, or a Tennessee Titans in which you would want, again, all 4 of those teams on bye. If you can find a player that has any of those options available for trade because they need to capture a victory this week, I'm going and knocking on those doors and saying, hey, what is it going to take for me to get George Pickens? Or, hey, what is it going to take for me to get, technically maybe Jake Ferguson off their hands? Obviously, you have Hawkinson and Njoku, and I think that can suffice, but you could also look for an upgrade in that regard. But ultimately, it's just a matter of knocking on the doors of teams that are desperate and kind of taking advantage of their desperation, to which they would be more willing to trade away players that would effectively kind of have a more concrete value point had they not been on bye in that given week. So, again, in your case, Jacobs, Dowdle, I don't want to move. Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson, I don't want to move. So it's really just a matter of, like, can you end up moving Woody, Spears, Kamara? I don't think so. Johnston, Watson, Myers, Golden, I don't think so. So I think you're in a tough position to where you kind of have to hold, unless you want to just outright sell Dowdle for a running back or plus a receiver or something of that exchange, which, again, I think that would be difficult in itself. But you find the right buyer in your league and you're all sales go. All right, let's see here. Let's go back to the live chat. Let's see what we have here. Jay says, hi, Andrew. In a 14-team league, I traded Devontae Smith, J.K. Dobbins, and Parker Washington for Justin Jefferson. The Justin Jefferson team was battered with injuries. I think that's a great trade. I mean, ultimately, I think it depends, right? Like, in a 14-team league, my only primary concern is I'm giving away all this depth for one player. I would like to assume that you wouldn't make this trade unless you had the depth to be able to, supplement those players in and justify the decision, because you are putting a lot of investment on one singular player when all these guys could have been contributing to your team. But in the event in which you're solidified, you have a lot of depth, and don't worry about it. You're fine. That's a great trade. Adam says, I started Caleb Williams or Matthew Stafford in week 10. Also, do I start Jalen Warren or Kyle Monangai? Well, Kyle Monangai is 100% dependent on whether or not DeAndre Swift is going to be active. So if Swift is active, I would play Jalen Warren. If Swift is inactive for a second consecutive game, I would play Kyle Monangai. As for Caleb Williams or Matthew Stafford, I'm playing Matthew Stafford. I don't think Caleb Williams is going out here and putting up 47 points on the board again with this offense, while I do anticipate Matthew Stafford to probably get his 3 passing touchdowns like he typically is able to do. Because over the course of the last, again, I've mentioned it, specifically as of late, essentially outside of the most recent 2 rushing touchdowns that Kyren Williams has been able to rack up as of late, we have seen the most recent Devontae Adams receiving touchdowns been accomplished, the last 5 of them, all inside the 5-yard line. So Matthew Stafford is going to get his touchdowns. He's going to be the more valuable prospect in my mind there. All right, let's hear. Pokey says, lost JD5, rank replacement options between Purdy, McCarthy, Tua, or Penix. Yeah, I would take Purdy number 1. If Purdy is still available, I would like to have him on roster. But the question is he even going to play this week? To which you would have to pick up 2 options in comparison. So I'd go Purdy 1, McCarthy 2, Penix 3, Tua 4. That's the order in which I would run it for the remainder of the year. But again, Purdy very much so dependent on whether or not he's even playing this week. Jared Wright says, I'm 8-1. 12-team PPR. Want to hear the team, Andrew? I would love to see the team. I want to know what an 8-1 team looks like, because I certainly don't have any 8-1 teams this season. Lost Tucker. How do we feel about Musgrave? I think Musgrave is a lesser player in terms of athleticism, in terms of being a potential receiving threat within this offense. But I truly do believe that they're going to utilize him at a little bit of a lesser position than where Tucker Kraft has been at, but still be good enough to be in that top 15 tight end conversation as we proceed. Tim O says, someone dropped Kincaid. Is it worth the number 2 waiver claim? I have Otten and Juwan Johnson. Yes, I think it's definitely worth it. The Bills are past their bye week, and he's continuing to get himself a lot of utilization within this offense. After coming off of this most recent week, playing well in a tough matchup, I think he's definitely worth it. Tony Lopez says, I'm worried about Swift and Monangai turning into Dowdle and Hubbard situation without clear lead back. Should I be worried? Would you trade them for Breece Hall? No, I don't think I would trade them. I mean, I like the schedule ahead for Swift and Monangai. And even though there may be a little bit of a complication, I know that Swift is going to be the clear and away goal line back as we, kind of continue on once he's healthy. But it's just purely a matter of how long is he going to miss. If he misses a couple more weeks, then I do believe that your concern will come to fruition and that they will become a backfield of a committee situation with no clear back. But if he comes back this week and reestablishes himself, I think at that point we'll be okay. Easy E, what's up? Says Flacco got me the win. Questions in the chat. Congratulations on playing Flacco. You are very much so very bold of you to go ahead and rip that off, brother. I mean, I think myself included, I did not want to play. I personally played Jacoby Brissett instead of Flacco this week. And technically, I might regret that later on this season in regards to like fantasy points scored for when it comes to like tiebreakers and that kind of jazz. But in regards to what Jacoby Brissett provided me, 3 touchdowns, 286 or 261 today, comparatively to 4 passing touchdowns, 400 yards. I might regret it, but again, at least I had a decent alternative in this case. Rome lost me the week, brother. So trust me, join the club. Rome Adunze, 3 targets, 0 catches. What an absolute disaster. Easy E says, I'm 6-3 and I'm in first place after tonight. 3 wide receiver superflex format with Nico, Flacco, Brissett, Mariota, JSN, Tetaroa, QJ, Moore, Watson, Jacobs, Bijan, Gadsden. Myers is my kicker, and the defense is Seattle and Tampa Bay. Should I drop Christian Watson of Tez, Pearsall? I think you meant 4. Tez, Pearsall, Parker, Washington, or Horton. I'd rather have Parker, Washington than Christian Watson for the remainder of the season. So if there's a possibility in which you can go ahead and make that swap, I would do so. Thank you. Michael Delatorre says, I'm 8-1 in a 12-team league. My team is Caleb Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Dowdle, Hendo, Harvey, Rice, Puka, JS. Brother, you hit the jackpot. My goodness. Okay, first and foremost, McCaffrey, crazy good. Dowdle, incredible waiver wire pickup. Puka, JSN, and then now you have Rice. And then you, of course, have been able to been carried recently with, brother, that's, sometimes they say there's no such thing as a perfect draft. Like, that looks like one of them. I will say that's a very considerably, like, considering the fact that Hendo and Harvey have really just effectively done nothing compared to where we selected them from, that's a ridiculous squad, man. Let's see here. 8-1 Hurts, White Bucky. Hurts, White Bucky. I mean, at this point, if you've got those 3 coming back for you, you're going to be in a really good spot here as we go. Is it time to drop Kamani Vidal? No. Also, trading Bijan for Jahmyr Gibbs and Bucky, good. Trading Bijan for Jahmyr Gibbs and Bucky, yes, I would immediately make that trade. As for dropping Kamani Vidal, I wouldn't do so because, again, earlier today, the head coach of the Chargers, Harbaugh, specifically came out and said that we don't expect to see Hampton return until after the bye week. So Kamani Vidal, even though, yes, he did get replaced in the second half of that game by Jarrett Patterson, the practice squad running back, I do anticipate to probably see, Kamani Vidal to still be in the mix of touches going forward. What do we think about Knight versus DeMarcado? I don't want any touch. I literally don't want to deal with that backfield at all going forward. I'm on the page of Clarence Owens, who was saying it earlier. I am 100% out on anything that has to do with that backfield. Because at this point, like, there's already the difficulty of trying to pick the right players. But if I have to be worried about my RB1, whether or not they're going to get touches, it's already difficult enough to do that. And then if I have an extra difficulty on top of it, it's just not worth it. Now, in regards to the potential of the rest of season schedule, guys, the Arizona Cardinals have one of the, if not the toughest strength of schedule at RB remainder of the season. The next 5 weeks here: Seattle, San Francisco, Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, LA Rams, Houston. Like, just those games alone, they're going to just get battered in the run game. Absolutely, it's not going to be a fun situation. So I don't want to have anything to do with Knight, DeMarcado, Trey Benson, any of those. No, I'm out. Josh Holt says, Lost Craft, should I seek a trade? Waiver options are Loveland, Musgrave, Theo Johnson, and Freiermuth. If you have the opportunity to pick up 2 of these options, 2 of the 4, I think that would be certainly something of a promising kind of position. You could seek out a trade, but I would first go to try to pick up a waiver wire option that could end up developing into a greater prospect for the remainder of the season. So in this case, I'd go and pick up Loveland and then subsequently follow it with going after either Theo Johnson if I'm not able to get Loveland. And then after that, if I can't get Theo, I would go after Musgrave. Let's see here. It says, would you drop Woody Marks or Chuba Hubbard? I would rather drop Chuba Hubbard because I still do believe that Woody Marks is going to get himself more workload as we proceed here. Bro, can Allen please dump off a few balls to Cook here? I mean, yeah, trust me. As someone who that has a good amount of shares of James Cook, besides the lack of receiving utilization, I think one of the most frustrating things when we have back-to-back weeks of Josh Allen getting 2 rushing touchdowns in both games. And then on top of it, we have a drive in which Ty Johnson comes in and steals a rushing touchdown. Like, really, what is the point of that? It's very interesting. I don't know. Sometimes it's just unpredictable. If you happen to be friends with Sean Payton, please tell him to get the ball to Sutton more. Cheers. Okay, thank you. I'll let him know. I'll give him a phone call tomorrow. I'm assuming in Denver right now, Central Time. It's probably past his bedtime, but he might be watching film. Who knows? I'll shoot him a text. I'll let him know. You have to remember, Sutton's usage this last week was primarily because of the matchup against Stingley and Lassiter. I think that's going to drastically change as we proceed because they don't have to play against the Houston Texans every single week. So as we kind of go on forward with the upcoming schedule of Las Vegas, Kansas City, Washington, Las Vegas, Green Bay, Jacksonville, Kansas City, I think he'll be in a far better position as we go. Justin sends it a question. What's up, my man? Says, I lost Kraft. Which one of these tight ends should I go after on the waiver wire? We have Hawkinson, Schultz, Jawan Johnson, Barner, Loveland, and Musgrave. Okay. That's a really good question. I think, again, I'm going to prefer to go after Loveland here because Cole Kmet did sustain a concussion. And I'm not joking. I think Loveland can get himself the possibility this week to where he completely solidifies himself. If, in fact, that touchdown didn't do the job, I think that the solidification of his position within this offense and being a premier threat will continue after this week in the absence of Cole Kmet. As they, if I'm not mistaken, Chicago plays against the New York Giants this week. So I think there's a relatively solid matchup there as well. In regards to if, in fact, you're not able to get Colston Loveland in this case, I would go for Hawkinson second. Then at that point, I would go for Musgrave third. Thank you. Actually, you know what? I'd go with Musgrave third. I could go with Schultz this week as a streaming option, who I think is better than Musgrave because of the matchup. But in terms of the rest of the season, I would prefer Hawkinson, Loveland, Musgrave. Ibrahim, what's up? Says 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 2 flex, Half PPR team. We have Lamar, Christian McCaffrey, Henry, AJ Brown, Sutton, Ferguson, Montgomery, Diggs. Okay, yeah, looking at your team as a whole, like if you were to trade away the Dart, Debo, Hunt, Dart, Brian Robinson. Yeah, so if you were going to trade away Dart, the way that I would try to go about it is to try to move him in order, I guess in a double flex format, half PPR, I'd like to get a running back in exchange for it to give yourself a little bit more depth outside of just Montgomery itself. But ultimately, if that's not something that you can get done, then sure, we can go after that Wan'Dale Robinson and just cash in on the value in which it currently exists. In the event in which we could go and maybe move Dart and Ferguson and go get a better tight end, I think that could also be a potential aspect or kind of road to go down and see what potentially lies behind those doors. Again, it's very much so dependent that the teams in your league that need quarterback want Dart. If there aren't very many teams in your league that need quarterback, then you just make the trade and keep it moving. Thank you. Is Brees getting traded? I would love to see that. I don't think so, but I would love to see it genuinely. I think that would be fantastic for fantasy purposes. All right, Shahir, what's up, my man? Go ahead and type in your question when you get an opportunity. Thanks, man. Let me just make sure that there weren't any super chats that were sent in that I missed earlier. Just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Cool, we are. Beautiful. Yeah, I would love to see Brees Hall get traded, but again, I think that's purely going to be dependent on whether or not there's a team out there that wants to utilize for potential 3rd or 2nd round draft capital to go for him. Man, if he went and ended up on a team that actually was in positive game scripts, he's such a talented runner that he could legitimately take over the league. And he's such a talented receiving back as well. You guys remember a couple years ago, he had 70 receptions with Zach Wilson at quarterback. I don't know if you guys remember that season. Let me find it real quick. Here we go. So Brees Hall, I believe it was 2020. Which years was it? Yeah, 2023, 76 receptions on 95 targets that season. Like, that's the kind of contribution that he needs to see every year. But unfortunately, of course, we haven't been able to get back to that range, primarily because the quarterback play has not been able to allow for it. All right, let's see here. Shahir says, hey, Andrew, I'm 5-4. I was wondering what moves I can make to boost my playoff chances. I think playoff chances are purely going to be dependent on the players that you have on roster as we kind of go forward. I'd like to see your team to kind of get an idea as to what we're looking at and how we can improve upon it. So type it in the chat when you get a chance. Easy E says, Kay, I messed up and didn't listen. All wide receivers, thanks. In the chat. Okay, let's see what you have here. Let's see here. I don't think you messed up. I think, again, playing Flacco was the right decision. I just was being incredibly cautious on Sunday. So, didn't list all wide receivers. So, what's the question in regards to that? Oh, yeah. So, basically, should I drop Christian Watson for Tez, Pearsall, Parker Washington, Horton? Yeah, let's drop Christian Watson for Parker Washington. If we can get the opportunity to do so, that's fantastic. And then additionally, by tomorrow afternoon, if Jacoby Myers is not traded prior to the NFL trade deadline, you would also drop him. Actually, no, you would drop Myers for Parker Washington. You would keep Christian Watson. That's how I want to go about it. Thank you, Easy. Appreciate it, my man. All right, let's see here. 3 wide receiver league. We have JSN, Emeka Egbuka, Tedero McMillan, Quentin Johnson, Christian Watson, DJ Moore. So what do you think about if I drop Christian Watson and Moore? Worth holding? Is Tet worth holding? Yeah, Tet is still worth holding. I'm perfectly fine with that. But in the case in which you can drop Myers, I think that's the way we should go about it in regards to your situation. How do we feel about Hendo while Ramondre was out? I mean, Terrell Jennings came in there and scored a rushing touchdown. Like, what are we doing, right? Even though, yes, 10 plus fantasy points is very much so a welcomed outcome for the case of Travion Henderson, I think that Ramondre, once he comes back, he takes over his job in full capacity. Shahir says bench consist. Okay, so let's see what your team is. Says I have Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Chase Brown, Rome Odunze, and Sutton, Loveland, and Njoku Kincaid. Bench consists of Shaheed, Chubb, Coker, Reed, and Ayuk. And is Coker droppable at this point? Yes, he's droppable. That offense does not have the ability to throw the ball on a consistent, weekly basis. It's very much so matchup dependent. If they played the Cowboys every week, I'd be okay with it, but they're not. So in the case of your situation with Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Chase Brown, Rome Odunze, Cortland Sutton, and then a slew of tight ends, in terms of potential moves that you would make to try to improve your odds to make the playoffs, I think it just depends on. Here's the issue, okay? I don't want to ship away Lamar Jackson or Christian McCaffrey because they are the backbone of your team. They are what's going to win you games. So in the event in which you were to move either of these two prospects, the haul in which you would have to get in return is going to have to be massive, which I'm not sure if there's many teams in your league that are going to be able to sustain that kind of a potential ask. To which at this point, I look at the wide receiver position. Sutton will be better. Rome Odunze will be better, but they're both very much so inconsistent prospects over the course of this season. So in terms of what you have on roster, unless you're going to break Chase Brown and ship him off to try to go get back in return an RB and a receiver, maybe you take Chase Brown and a Rome Odunze theoretically and sell them off for a 2-for-2. Unless you're going to make a swap of that nature, I think you kind of have to hold and just play the waiver wire and hope for Ayuk and Reed to come back and be relevant. Because I don't want to have to break apart either of these two studs in Lamar and Christian McCaffrey. I don't think Loveland and Njoku or Kincaid provide much trade potential value considering how many good tight ends there are out there right now in fantasy. So for now, unless you're going to move Chase Brown in order to get back a running back and a wide receiver to kind of bolster your roster in that regard, I think you just keep it as is and keep it pushing. Because in due time, eventually there will be waiver wire opportunities to go pick up a Parker Washington or a Torrey Horton. And I think those guys will be better options than a Coker or a potential Nick Chubb on your bench in which they can provide a little more value and more flexible kind of upside. And I have Brashard Smith. Yes, he's droppable outright. No doubt about it. Scott, what's up, my man? It says rank Trevor Lawrence, Purdy, Flacco, rest of season, 6 point per passing touchdown. Would you? Okay, yeah. Flacco's number 1, Purdy's 2, Trevor Lawrence is 3. Says also rather pick up Ridley, Ayuk, or Loveland as the best overall value for a non-PPR rest of season. In terms of non-PPR rest of season value, I have no interest in Ridley. I have no interest in Ayuk. I'd legitimately pick up Loveland because I don't know when Ayuk's timeline is to come back. And I know for a fact that the offense for the Tennessee Titans is a disaster, and I really don't want anybody within that roster to be in my fantasy lineups. Outside of maybe Chamir DK, but even in this most recent week, was a no-show offensively and got himself a bailout punt return for a touchdown because he's so damn talented. Laporta or Andrews rest of season, that's a really good one, Freddie. I think in terms of the upcoming schedule ahead, considering Andrews gets to play against Cincinnati twice, I would legitimately rather. But look, here's the thing. Mark Andrews has to compete with Likely and Kohler. That makes it so much more difficult. That's my concern. But I legitimately would still rather have Mark Andrews rest of the season if it's a half PPR. If it's a full PPR, at that point, give me Laporta. Because I know that touchdowns aren't as, they're not the make or break at that point in that format. Hoping Shaheed gets traded by tomorrow. I hope so too. That would actually save your situation greatly, especially if he gets moved to like a team like Buffalo. That would be a lot of noise. Yo, Andrew, what are some receivers you're targeting that have great fantasy playoff matchups? Let me go ahead and pull up the fantasy playoff strength of schedule right now. I haven't been able to update it in regards to including Week 9's performances, but in regards to just from last week, from weeks 1 through 8, in terms of applying that fantasy point per game matchups to the fantasy playoffs, the most advantageous schedule for the fantasy playoffs belongs to the wide receivers of the Vikings, Commanders, 49ers, Browns, Colts, Bears, Eagles, Giants. So in the event in which, theoretically speaking, you can go buy low on a Deebo Samuel, or potentially a Jordan Addison, or a Ricky Pearsall, or a Roma Dunze, an AJ Brown, a Wan'Dale Robinson. Those are technically the most advantageous matchups at wide receiver position for the fantasy playoffs. But by far and away, the Vikings are ahead of everybody. So by the time we get to that position and they take on the Dallas Cowboys in week 15, the Giants in week 16, and Detroit, who they just whooped their ass in week 17, that's 3 weeks in a row in which we have an opportunity in which Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, and of course, a fully experienced kind of JJ McCarthy, once we get to that back end of the year, can put together, pretty solid performances there. Let's see here. Angel sends in a question. Angel Montero. Let me go ahead and see if you typed your question into the live chat real quick. Says, hey, Andrew, what's your thoughts on my team? At the moment, anywhere I can improve. Currently 5-4 with Knicks, Chase, Sutton, QJ, Evans, Godwin, Achane, Henry, Dowdle, Irving. Wow, brother. This is how we improve your team. You should genuinely be looking to move maybe just Rico Dowdle in order to try to go get back a potential improvement at wide receiver. Like in the case in which you have the opportunity to take Dowdle and Sutton and go get a top tier receiver, I would try to explore the opportunity of doing so. And I think it's very much so possible in your league, considering Dowdle should be the guy going forward. Now, you could wait a week if Irving doesn't return this week to the lineup. And if he doesn't, then at that point you can wait one more week before you do so. But you have 4 incredible running backs. And unless you can start 2 running backs and 2 flex every week, I would be looking to move Dowdle immediately after that boom performance most recently. Try to get back a wide receiver in exchange. Specifically, if we're looking for wide receivers that are of the similar value point, I genuinely am going to knock on the Justin Jefferson door. Like I would try to do that. I would go knock on a Jalen Waddle door, Emeka Ibuka, Devontae Adams, Michael Pittman Jr. Those are the kind of players that I want, because that's the kind of value that Dowdle should theoretically have rest of season based on how this offense is functioning and how he has genuinely been like a generational player 3 times in just the last 6 weeks. All right, Chris, what's up, my man? Says, Andrew, my question's in the chat. Okay, let me go ahead. Let me just change this up real quick. I wanted to go ahead before, make sure there weren't any questions that I missed. Okay, cool. All right, let's see what you have here, brother. Says, in a half PPR, we have Lamar, we have Genti, we have ETN, Puka, Debo, Kittle, Monungai, Ertz, Harvey, Flowers, Ricky Pearsall, Sutton, Reed. What move should I make? What move should I be making to improve my team? I mean, Lamar Jackson, you can't really improve upon. Genti and ETN, I mean, again, ETN rest of the season, relatively strong schedule if it wasn't for the fact that, of course, all 3 rushing touchdowns of the Jacksonville Jaguars went to other players, aka Trevor Lawrence and Bayshaw Tootin. Etienne was given the goal line opportunities. He didn't score this week, and hopefully he'll be able to do so in the future. Genty's perfectly fine. Hopefully his receiving utilization continues to stay consistent, but considering we have seen Geno Smith be a great check down provider for Kenneth Walker in the past, I would believe that he'll be able to continue that for Genty. Puka's great. Your wide receiver 2 could be lacking as we proceed here, but you do have Sutton, Debo, Flowers, and Ricky Pearsall. So honestly, we're just going to play matchups in that position going forward. Kittle's still very much so sustainable, and I only believe that he's going to get better once Purdy's back in the lineup. Monangai provides you a little bit of RB depth alongside of Harvey, which are both the young players that, again, at any point of an injury occurring to the primary guy on that offense, they become automatic weekly flex plays every single time out. Looking at the team as a whole, I'm not looking at it thinking, oh, I need help. I'm looking at it and thinking I have a really good shot of not only making the playoffs, but making some noise there, assuming my wide receivers are able to produce at the rate at which I want them to. Now, in the event in which you can go out and utilize these wide receivers to try to go get a Garrett Wilson potentially, or go buy low on a potential wide receiver that is going on bye this week from a team that, again, is desperate for wide receiver help because of the bye week. So if someone out there has Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, and they're desperate and they need a win this week and they can't afford to lose those guys because of the bye, I'm going and I'm knocking on those doors to try to trade for them to bring back some value in order to kind of give myself the opportunity to, yes, I don't have to win this week, but at least I can get those players on my roster for the fantasy playoffs. Bryce Long says, Pinheiro or Fairbairn rest of season, Loveland or Fannin rest of season. Theoretically speaking, in regards to the Pinheiro and Fairbairn, considering, I think once Brock Purdy comes back, the answer is Pinheiro. But I think it's also a discussion of home versus away scheduling for the remainder of the year, because Fairbairn plays indoors. And when they play against Indianapolis upcoming here, which they're gonna have the opportunity to do twice, those are indoor games as well. So with the upcoming schedule, I think it depends on how many games is Pinheiro going to be subjected to playing outdoors in terrible weather situations. I think that becomes the question in which we'd have to kind of look at. Otherwise, for right now, I would prefer Pinheiro because of the potential of that offense, in my mind, scoring more often once Purdy comes back. In regards to Loveland versus Fannin, I would like the answer to be Loveland. I would probably say if Njoku is not traded by tomorrow, the answer is Loveland. That's my prognostication for right now. If Njoku is traded at that point, Fannin's the guy. Vlad, what's up? Says questions in the chat. Thanks, Andrew. All right, no problem, my man. Swift/Monangai or Warren rest of season? That's a really good question. Based on scheduling alone, Warren has such a fantastic schedule ahead of him that he's probably the answer rather than having to juggle the two of these guys. Says in a half PPR, what trade moves should I try to make? Quarterbacks are Goff and Darnold. Okay, so you have Darnold. Fantastic. Beautiful. Running back, Jacobs, Swift, Etienne, Monangai, Vidal, Benson. Okay, so looking at the running back depth as a whole, you have Jacobs and Etienne. I think having Swift and Monangai is incredibly valuable because Vidal will eventually disappear because of course, Hampton eventually returning after the Week 12 bye. Benson has a really difficult strength to schedule, and in a half PPR is a lesser option because his receiving workload won't be able to elevate him as much. And the backfield looks like it's going to be a committee as we proceed. Now, in regards to wide receiver, you have J.J. Adams, Quentin Johnston, Pearsall, McLaurin. Tight ends are Laporta and Gadsden. Yeah, honestly, at this point, looking at the team as a whole, I don't mind making the move of Swift and Monangai for Warren, but I think that there could be, if I look at here's the difficulty of having both these running backs. If it becomes a Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker situation and both of them get depleted because they're splitting opportunities, it could be genuinely disastrous. I think right now, I just go get the Warren. Just give me Warren and let me run with it. You don't need the running back depth in this situation. You don't need the headache that this could provide. Sure, maybe both of them become relevant at a capacity to which they can both start. But if that's not the case, I'd still rather have Warren than Swift in terms of rest of season value based on the schedule ahead in a half PPR. So for now, Jacobs, Warren, Etienne, J.J. Adams, playing one of these two stud tight ends, probably playing one of these two quarterbacks depending on schedule. I think that's a pretty appropriate kind of move right now. The only issue is in terms of other trades that you could explore, Pearsall and McLaurin's injuries really have not done you any justice. Your trade potential would be regarding one of these two, to which you could take Laporta or Gadsden to a team that's tight end needy and wants one of these two prospects. I think Laporta would probably sell for more, considering 3 of the last 4 games in which he has played, he's been incredible, to which you might be able to move a Laporta to try to get a wide receiver to help you out for flexible purposes, or maybe even pair up Laporta with a running back like Swift Monungai and go get an even better running back in exchange instead of a Warren potentially. Let's see here. Bryce says rank rest of season, Flacco, Fields, JJM. Okay, yeah, between the 3 of them, Flacco's number 1. Fields is, Flacco is 1, McCarthy's number 2, Fields is 3. Steelers defense rest of season is good, ? I don't know if that's the case. Genuinely, I don't know if that's the case. Let's see here. Let me look at their schedule. So ahead they have the Chargers, then they have the Bengals. So they're going to get poured on. Then they get the Bears, which they'll be fine against. Then they have Buffalo, Baltimore, which they're going to get poured on 2 more times. So unless you're going to, and then they have Detroit in the playoffs. So in the fantasy playoffs, they take on Miami week 15 and Cleveland week 17. I would love to have them in the fantasy playoffs for 2 of those 3 weeks. Outside of that, I think they're a drop, genuinely. Weasel sends in a question, says in a full PPR 1 flex league, my league mate is offering me Chris Olave, George Pickens, and Tyrone Tracy for Devon Achane. Would you do it? I would. Primarily because if I'm looking for depth on my team, I know it's a 1 flex format, but if Olave, Pickens, or Tyrone Tracy, if 2 of these 3 players end up starting for your team within the upcoming weeks as a weekly startable player, and then additionally because of bye weeks ahead with, Pickens going on bye, eventually Olave going on bye, Tracy going on bye, it could also help you out for other bye weeks in general, the 3-for-1 value there, I think, is very much so solidified. Now, if you show me the rest of your roster and none of these guys end up playing and maybe only 1 of the 3 play every week, it's not worth it at that point. It's just a matter of how impactful are those 3 players to your starting roster weekly as we go forward. Shahir says, how do we rank these tight ends rest of the season? I need to try to trade 1, Kincaid, Loveland, Njoku. As of right now, I'd probably go Kincaid 1, Loveland 2, Njoku 3. That's the way I'd roll it. Joseph Mai says, I could drop Kareem, Kamara, or Algier for a wide receiver if I need one. Yeah, you drop Algier to accomplish that. I'm 1-7 right now. Need some wins to get to get high as possible. Do I trade Hampton for Etienne and Higgins? Yes, immediately. Hampton's not coming back until after the bye. Etienne will provide you value this week. But I think you should trade T. Higgins as well to try to get another player to help you out this week, to try to get you a win. Thoughts on Parker Washington rest of the season? I mentioned it at the beginning of earlier today's waiver wire rankings episode. I think he's a fantastic pickup. I think he should probably be, unless a trade happens tomorrow that includes like Breece Hall going to another team, I think Parker Washington should probably be prioritized as the number 1 waiver wire pickup of the week. For those of you who play with priority, or for those of you who play with Fab, he should probably garner the greatest contribution of Fab percentage out of all the players. Because again, Travis Hunter's on the IR. Tim Patrick didn't play last week. Brian Thomas Jr. just injured his ankle. Diami Brown just went to the concussion protocol. Brenton Strange is still on the injured reserve as well. And Parker Washington's coming off of back-to-back weeks with 9 or more targets. Incredible potential for success going forward. Dexter says, I have Nix and Flacco. Would you trade Flacco and Ladd for Amon-Ra? I would. I'm okay with that. That sounds good to me. Mark says, my bad for the spam. I'm worried. What happened? What did you spam? I don't even know if you spam. Andrew, I'm going to bed in 5. Okay, let's see what you have here, brother. Says, I'm 4-5. I need to win next week and have Rice and Pickens on bye. My other wide receivers are Trey Tucker and Kendrick Bourne. So you don't have any other receivers is what you're saying. Okay. My running backs are Bijan, Cook, Swift, Hampton. Tight ends are Kittle, Pitts. What trade should I do? Yeah, so in this case, unfortunately, with the reality of your situation, unless guys like Parker Washington, like I mentioned, to Alec Pierce, these kind of players that Christian Watson, Horton, Darius Slayton, unless Tez Johnson, the 6 wide receivers I mentioned on today's waiver wire episode, unless those players are available to which they could play over these players, you would then be subject to trading Rice and Pickens, or Pickens, keep Rice. You would trade Pickens and one of your running backs, like Hampton. So Pickens and Hampton, you would try to trade them both to go get 2 wide receivers to kind of suffice as startable options to help you win this week. And that's how I would go about it. Thank you. All righty. All right, so I'm going to be answering a couple more questions here before we close out. Let's say both Pierce and Washington are on waivers. Beautiful. Let's go for both of them. And then at that point, if you can get both, I don't think you'll have to be forced to make a trade. I think it'll solidify you in a position to where you can keep Rice and Pickens on roster, so where once they come off of the bye next week, hopefully they will have helped you capture a victory, Pierce and Washington, to where then, for weeks to follow, Pickens and Rice can get back into your starting lineup. Like I was going to mention just a moment ago, I'm going to go ahead and answer a couple more questions for a couple more minutes, and we're going to close it out today. Got to get to, preparing tomorrow's running back rankings video. I'll be back tomorrow night to answer questions before the waiver wire, and of course, talking about the trade deadline and what transpired tomorrow afternoon. So we'll see where we go in regards to that. But again, I do appreciate y'all coming through, supporting the channel, clicking the like button, of course, checking out Betr and using code Andrew today, getting those rankings. Of course, for those of you who are members of the Patreon, I greatly appreciate that. Again, like I mentioned before, for those of you guys who want to get your all-encompassing questions answered, get my rankings every Thursday and Sunday, send me individualized questions, get access to the Discord exclusive community server. Again, that is all available via the Patreon. So again, if you guys are interested, check that out down below. Thank you. All right, let's see. I wanted to ask another. I have JD and Kraft that went down with injuries. Do I trade Olave for Goddard and Dart? Yeah, you should. Absolutely. Because if Dart, like let's say for example, the next best quarterback on the waivers ends up being like Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy, I would rather have Dart because I think he's top 10 rest of season. And I think Goddard is top 10 tight end rest of season, to which you don't have to go and sift through weekly waiver wire pickups for the rest of the season. I think this is very much so an incredible trade in your case. Joe, what's up? Says I drop Hawkinson for Loveland or Theo Johnson. I mean, let's see here. In terms of Hawkinson's usage I think I would. I think I would rather have Loveland, genuinely. Honestly, I would maybe even rather have Theo Johnson as well because of the likelihood of touchdowns rolling in. Tony Lopez says in my Superflex 2 quarterback limit league. Okay. I've got both BTJ and Parker Washington already. Was wondering if I should trade JJ McCarthy for Devontae Smith to replace them as my wide receiver 2 and pick up Fields off of the waivers. So here's my concern. What if Fields gets benched? Is JJ McCarthy your third quarterback on roster? If the answer is yes, then yeah, I'm willing to make that trade. Like let's say for example, you've already got 2 studs. Then at that position, and JJ is your number 3, then I'd be more than happy making this trade. Andre says, hey Andrew, Stafford or Dart for rest of season? As of right now, I'd rather have Stafford. I think he's on a generational run right now in terms of breaking potentially all of his career highs. He is on that kind of a run. The offense has just been marvelous, and I think their upcoming schedule is also really solid. So I'd go with Stafford there. Conventional wisdom would tell me usually to go after the quarterback that has the rushing upside in the form of Jackson Dart, who again continues to rack up stats via rushing, which again continues to solidify his value point. But I mean, shoot, man, he's coming off another game of another rushing touchdown. But the thing is, man, you know what? Maybe it's not even Stafford, but when I look at their upcoming schedules, the fact that Stafford is past his bye, there's just so many shootouts that I can see happening. San Francisco, Seattle, Tampa Bay, Arizona, Detroit. I mean, I like what I'm seeing here ahead in terms of the potential of Stafford, so I'll roll in that direction, but I think they're probably back-to-back in terms of rest of season value. Ferguson, Loveland, Fannin, rest of season, I think that's the order at which we run it. In the event in which Njoku doesn't get traded, Fannin's last. If Njoku gets traded tomorrow, then he goes ahead of probably all 3 of them, genuinely. Trade Trey Benson for Jaylen Warren? Yes, immediately. Get it done. Immediately. Colin's going to be the final question of this evening. Says, yo, Andrew, last week I traded Jaylen Warren, Josh Allen, and Nico and Shakir for Bijan, AJ Brown, and Caleb Williams. I have Christian McCaffrey and Dowdle and JSN and Sutton, Quentin Johnson. I'm 8-1. Your thoughts on further moves? In terms of potential further moves, I think considering you have Christian McCaffrey, Dowdle, Bijan, JSN, AJ Brown, Sutton, Quentin Johnson, Caleb Williams technically is your weakest link. So in the event in which you could go and trade for a Jackson Dart, or maybe you could just stick with him, but in the event in which you can go and trade for a better quarterback that has a softer schedule ahead, I think that could be a plan of action. Somebody asked Jacobs for Flacco and Ladd. I'll take Jacobs too in that case. That works for me as well. As long as it's not a 2 QB league, I think that's very much so a deal that I'm willing to make. But in regards to further moves there, yeah, I would try to go get a better quarterback because Caleb, genuinely, they want to run the ball. And unless he plays against Cincinnati every week, which they're not going to, it's going to be a little bit more difficult as we kind of go forward here, as I'm sure you're aware of. All right, that's going to cover for me, guys. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Again, I'll be back tomorrow with my top 36 running back rankings. I'll be back tomorrow night with another live stream. So again, if you guys have any questions, you can swing on by in regards to those overall situations. Outside of that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. I'm going to go ahead and cue the double helix, and I will bid you farewell. Until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.